Like last September, Apple just announced their new iPhone 15 lineup. What's not like last September is that so many people are choosing not to upgrade from their iPhone 14. As someone who works full-time in media, my interest in these smartphones really falls on what photo and video features they have. And so when a lot of my creative friends are choosing not to update to the new model, I want to know why. Is it that these new phones are just bad phones? Is it that in the economy we're in, people are just wanting to save money and cut costs? Or was there just not a lot of updates that went into the iPhone 15 that were not already in the iPhone 14? So let's talk first about what happened in the announcement, what seems to be the same between the 14 and the 15, and perhaps most interesting to me, what are the 7 most exciting media upgrades they made on this year's iPhones, coming from the opinion of a full-time photographer, cinematographer, and reluctant iPhone videographer. Let's get into it. So if this year's announcement meeting taught me anything, it's that Apple really loves drone shots. Literally the entire time that I was watching this video, I was expecting something like this to happen. But when you step back from all the cool shots, the beautiful interiors that it was filmed in, and the little drama about Mother Nature, there wasn't actually a lot announced at this year's update. The event primarily covered 3 different things. The first is the updates to the Apple Watch, which we're not going to go into that. Personally, I don't love the shape of them. That's why I've never invested in one. They seem cool. It's just not for me. The second part of what they went into was the new iPhone 15 lineup, which has the iPhone 15, 15 Plus, 15 Pro, and 15 Pro Max. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And yes, they also did talk about the Apple Vision Pro, but I still see that as being something that's years out from becoming mainstream. So I don't want to touch on that. The one thing they did continually talk about over and over and over again was Apple's ethical sustainability practices, their commitment to environmental sustainability, and the steps they're taking. While talking about, they used a lot of buzzwords, which to me sounded like words that didn't really mean anything, kind of like when a brand says that something's like organic, like what does that actually mean? It doesn't really mean anything, but it sounds good. It's not why we're here today, but it's clearly something that Apple wanted to keep forefront in this entire announcement meeting, which is why I mentioned it in this. Having said that, let's jump into what seems to be the same between the Apple 14 and the Apple 15. And I think this is going to be one of the big reasons why a lot of people are choosing to stay. And again, everything I do talk about is going to be from a photo video perspective. So if you're interested in a more like broader sense, everything they have to offer, this probably isn't the video for you. But if you're interested in smartphone photography and videography, then stick around and we're going to talk about that. Okay, I got to be honest, in terms of similarity, when you're talking the base models between the 14 and 15 generation, there is not a ton that seems to be the same between the photo and video capabilities. The 14, you're dealing with a 12 megapixel sensor, whereas the 15 upgrades to a 48 megapixel sensor, which was previously in the 14 Pro models only. I actually believe they actually just took all of that tech and put it into the 15 base model. What this means is that you are going to be capturing a lot more information as there is a higher pixel density in each of the photo that you take. This means that you're going to have stronger details, better details captured. You're going to have higher quality photos. You're going to be able to crop in more without losing quality like you would have with the previous model. So that, I've got to be honest, there's not a lot that's the same with this. But that's not to say that there isn't some things that remained largely the same. Both cameras, when they go to the ultra wide, do only have a 12 megapixel sensor that they are operating on. And so that's something that's definitely the same. Both of these cameras, these base models, do not possess the telephoto lens. They only have the ultra wide and the regular lens. So again, that's the same between them. They're both able to still film in 4K. They have access to pretty much all the modes. The front facing camera is the same amount of megapixels. There are a lot of similarities, but the sensor is a big one that is different, and that does unlock a lot of potential with the base models. But honestly, I think if you're a really serious videographer, photographer, you're probably going to be looking at the Pro models if you are interested in iPhone photography, because always there are the 3 lenses there. There's so much about the Pro models that lend to creativity and creating videos, photos. Especially if you're working with clients, you're going to want one of those Pro models. So let's jump more into that. What are the similarities between the Pro models? And I think there are more similarities from a photo video sense between the Pro models than there are between the base models. And I think that's what we need to spend more time focusing on. Okay, so to start off with, all 4 phones, the Pro, Pro Max for the 14 and 15, all have 48 megapixel sensors. So there hasn't really been that much of an upgrade in this sense. They say it's a better sensor. I guess time will tell. See, we're gonna have to experiment with that, but they are all 48 megapixel. Also, the ultra wide and telephoto lenses that the Pro models possess are all 12 megapixel sensors that they work off of. They're not the 48 megapixel that is advertised with the rest of the camera. They all have optical stabilization, which from what we saw in the tests with the 14 Pro models, absolutely fantastic. It's rolled over, improved in this one, but they all have it. They all continue to push portrait mode with the ability to shift focus on what your subject is using, I guess, a computational photography that they have in there. So if you decide afterwards that you want to change who your subject is in the photo and the person in the back is blurred out and the person in the front isn't, you can swap those afterwards, which is absolutely mind-blowing from a photography standpoint. They all have the photographic styles that you can use. And from a videography standpoint, all 4 models are capable of recording in 4K in 24, 25, 30, and 60 frames per second. And as far as cinematic mode goes, they are all capable of recording in 4K up to 30 frames a second. So that has not improved in this model. And stabilization while you're filming video still has the built-in stabilization. Really, really fantastic with that. There is a difference that exists in the 15 models, but only with the Pro Max, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And as far as the selfie camera goes, it is still a 12 megapixels camera across the board, and most of the settings are exactly the same. Most of the ability to record is exactly the same. There is some differences, and again, we're about to jump into that. So right off the bat, I think it's safe to say there is a lot when it comes to video and photo settings about these 2 phones that is exactly the same. And I understand why a lot of videographers and photographers are saying, why would I pay all this money to upgrade when basically I'm getting the same thing? But like I said at the beginning of the video, there are 7 really exciting video and photo upgrades that I think would be a shame not to talk about because they are really drastically improving what creators can do. So let's jump straight into the 7 exciting things that you should look out for on the iPhone 15 Pro series. So to start off with, yes, the 15 and 14 Pros all have the 48 megapixel sensor. I think I want to list this as the first exciting thing though, because yes, the 15 Pro does get a sensor upgrade from the 14 Pro, even though they both are 48 megapixel sensor. I think when you talk about the 15 and 14 base models, the jump from a 12 megapixel sensor up to a 48 megapixel sensor is really, really exciting for me. Because a lot of people are not going to be buying the Pro models, and to be able to have that in the base model of a phone, I think is just going to be really great for a lot of people that are starting off, but don't necessarily want to spend the $1,600, $1,700, $2,000, whatever it is, dollars to buy this phone. All prices are in Canadian. I realize there's the Canada tax. And so that sensor increase across the board, I think is really, really cool and worth noting because it's just gonna really add a lot of quality to the type of media that the everyday user who isn't a photographer or videographer is gonna be able to use. And then the small upgrade on the side of the Pro models is gonna benefit, obviously, our more professional users like myself that does use an iPhone regularly for client work. And something that's important to mention about the 48 megapixel sensor is that the iPhone's not actually using the full 48 megapixels when capturing these images.
The sensor groups every 4 pixels together into a larger 2-micron pixel for fantastic light capture. Then Photonic Engine takes the image that's been optimized for light capture and combines it with a super high resolution image for rich details. The result is a 24 megapixel photo with incredible image quality and double the resolution. It perfectly balances light and detail and has a practical file size that's great for storing and sharing.
So you're actually shooting primarily on either a 12 megapixel or 24 megapixel sensor, even though it is coming from a 48 megapixel sensor, if that makes any sense. The second really cool upgrade that I see, and honestly, I'm not even sure if everyone feels this way because I've seen some creators react in a way of like, why did they do this, is the lens selection. So obviously with the Pro models, you do have the 3 different lens options that all allow for optical capturing of photos. I want to talk about the main one because something that the Pro series did, the 15 Pro and Pro Max did, is they added the ability to change your default camera. Now, this is a little bit deceiving because Apple keeps talking about this entire, how many lenses you have to select from.
Macro is one of the 7 lenses of the new Pro camera system, with a 10x optical zoom range going from 13 to 120 millimeter focal length.
You don't. You have 3 lenses to select from, and based on how they utilize the sensor and cropping, they give you different focal lengths using those 3 lenses. So they'll say something like you have 7 different lenses. You don't. You have 3 lenses, and based on how they design the sensor, how they crop, how they zoom out, they give you 7 or 8 different options, which is still really cool. But what I find really cool is they added a feature called default focal length for the main camera. And so what this feature does is it allows you to set your default focal length for your main camera to either 24, 28, or 35 millimeters, which are 3 very popular lens sizes. To be honest, I really hate the 28 millimeter focal length. I don't own a lens that has it. I love 24, I love 35. 28 feels like it's not wide enough or it's not compressed enough. And I think it's a horrible focal length, but hey, they added it. I'm sure some people are gonna love it. While we're speaking of focal lengths, we obviously have to talk about the updated 5x telephoto zoom lens that is on the Pro Max. Very noticeably this time, the Pro is missing a 5x telephoto zoom lens, bringing back the 3x zoom that they had before. What this breaks down to in focal lengths is that the iPhone 15 Pro is going to have a 77 millimeter lens as a telephoto lens, and the iPhone 15 Pro Max will have 120 millimeter focal length on their telephoto lens. What's really cool is to build this 5x telephoto lens, they did not actually use a periscope lens like many other smartphones did, but instead bounced light back and forth 4 times to be able to allow the light to travel further in a much shorter distance, something that Apple is calling a Tetraprism design. I don't know what that means, but honestly, it's really cool, and it doesn't seem to increase the size of the phone, which begs to question, why didn't they put it in the Pro as well? I'm guessing it's because they wanted to charge a little bit more for the Pro Max than they did last year. But who knows, maybe they actually did just run out of room, but I feel like my general feeling and maybe conspiracy theory is that when it comes to Apple, if there's a way that they can upsell you on anything or charge money for any aspect of their product, they're going to. Stepping back into more of the software side of things, one thing that the Pro series did bring back was the portrait mode. And what I think is really exciting about the portrait mode is it's expanded to night shooting. So there is night portrait mode now where you can utilize that f-stop. But also the computational photography that advances that Apple has been making, which both terrifying and beautiful as a photographer, allow you to go back afterwards and change the subject of your photo. Now, having said that, I'm also very curious how it's going to perform, because in the past, I've often found that the portrait mode looks very unrealistic. People talk about how incredible it is, how real to life it is when mimicking the f-stop of a actual lens on a real camera. And I've never found it convincing. I found that in order to get it to actually look good, you probably need to have your f-stop somewhere around f6, f8, something like that. If you have it a low f1.6, it's going to look really unrealistic, and it's obvious that it is a digital blur that you're getting and not something brought on by focal length. Because of this, as a photographer and videographer using an iPhone, I've always preferred to use a telephoto lens on the iPhone because I think it adds a natural compression, which is much more realistic and much more, I think does a better job at separating the subject from the background than the fake software f-stop ever has. So I'm excited to see this time around with the 15 Pro and Pro Max, are we going to see a drastic upgrade in that computational photography, in that artificial f-stop blur that we get, where it is actually going to start looking really real without having to be, an f8, f16. So I'm excited to see how that looks. Obviously, we can't talk about the upgrades to the media side of this phone without talking about the change to USB-C. Let's be honest, it's always hilarious to watch Apple try to word something or pivot something like they created it or it was their idea, and they're just like so thrilled to give it to us. I mean, I get they have to do it. They have to try to put a positive spin on it, but let's be real. It was Europe's laws they were passing that made Apple actually upgrade to the USB-C, but that they weren't able to continue using the Lightning port, which had slower transfer speeds, and also made everyone buy another cord directly from Apple that they couldn't use for anything else. So thanks, Europe. Because of your greatness, we're having USB-C. Now, it is important to note that the difference between the Pro series and the base series of the iPhone 15 does see a difference in the USB-C that you will receive, which of course, because Apple, what you're seeing is that with the USB-C on the Pro models, you are going to get 20 times transfer speeds. We're not getting Thunderbolt speeds, but we are getting 20 times transfer speeds compared to the previous, Lightning port, which is really, really great. On the base models, you are going to USB-C, but you're going to be on USB-C 2 instead of 3, and your transfer speeds are going to be pretty much the same as the Lightning port, because Apple's got to do it. Apple's got to Apple. Regardless, we're on USB-C, and at least you're not going to have to buy a completely separate cord. What are you going to do with the 15 Lightning cords around your apartment? Well, I don't know. Regardless, what the upgrade to USB-C 3 for the Pro series does is enables this next upgrade, which I think is very, very exciting, and probably, in my opinion, the most exciting upgrade from the previous model. And that's the addition of 60 ProRes video, and perhaps much more exciting and important, the ability to upgrade your footage and actually film in log format. And this isn't just like Apple's take on log. There's a lot of third-party apps which kind of did like a desaturating effect that allowed you to have like log footage that wasn't really log footage, just helped you push it a little more. But that's not what this is, because the log that Apple put in place in the 15 Pro models is in alignment with the Academy color management system, which is across the board kind of the global standard for color grading, which is really, really fantastic, because as someone who does a lot of iPhone Reels for commercial clients, color grading on them is always kind of a pain in the butt, because it doesn't color grade the way that, say, my Sony A7 IV footage would, my S-Log3 footage, or any of the other kind of log footage that you're going to get, and pushing it to that it always ends up looking different. So the fact that they're including log and it's in alignment with this global standard, hats off, Apple. Amazing, love it. The downside of this is, so far it seems like in order to record 4K 60 FPS ProRes log footage, it's looking like you're going to need to record to an external storage system, an external SSD, straight to your computer. It's not going to be in body, which honestly, it's frustrating. And this is what the USB-C 3 enables it to do. But conspiracy hat on again, I have no doubt that the storage options that are going to come out probably are going to be at an Apple premium, and they're going to be, I don't know. Apple's got to Apple. At the end of the day, we're still getting the footage. It's just kind of annoying that you're going to have to carry around a storage device in order to actually capture that log footage with you. But again, in the rules of working with commercial clients, the bigger the rig you show up with, the more impressed the clients are. Be literally the worst camera in the world, but if it's bigger than the small one, it's a better camera. So I'm not going to complain. I think it's really exciting. I think it's a really great advancement. I'm excited to see where it goes. I think it's going to make videography on the iPhone so much easier from a post perspective. And finally, I think I've got one more. If I listed 7, then this is 8, but I'm pretty sure this is 7. It's allowing you to record spatial video on the iPhone Pro series, which is, I think, really, really exciting. Is there a lot of application for it? Absolutely not. It's just kind of on the Apple Vision Pro, but honestly, going somewhere beautiful, to the mountains, to the lake, whatever, being family memories and recording this in depth so that eventually, once the technology is out there enough, you can watch your memories back in a sense of 3D, I think is very, very, very cool. It'll just be so much more immersive. And honestly, as a videographer, I see this as a massive earning potential, because just like stock footage is going to be a thing as this technology advances, the ability to sell depth capturing footage for people to view from their homes and travel anywhere in the world, I think is going to be massive. And I think there's going to be a lot of kind of copyright-free video potential for this spatial capturing technology. So that's it, guys. That's the 7 really exciting video and photo media updates that the Apple 15 lineup has. I know I talked mostly about the Pro series, but honestly, I think all the exciting ones are from them, apart from the larger sensor that the base model's getting. As a few honorable mentions, there is an update on the Pro Max to the stabilization software. It no longer just goes up and down and over sideways. It's now fully 3D, goes back and forth as well. And this is just to help with the increased zoom of the telephoto lens, just because anyone who shoots regularly video with a telephoto knows that the smallest adjustments make a ton of difference in how it comes across. It changes the scene real quick. So they did upgrade that on the Pro Max, which is really exciting. I mentioned that with night mode, there is the ability to do portrait mode with that, so you are getting that f-stop ability. So what are the final conclusions and thoughts from a videographer? And do I think that the people not upgrading are making a mistake by not upgrading? No, I think the iPhone 14 and 14 Pro, Pro Max, absolutely great phone. I've seen the media that comes out of them. And honestly, most of this phone is kind of a repeat of the 15 Pro and Pro Max. So if you had that, I honestly probably wouldn't upgrade either. I, on the other hand, am sitting at an 11 base model, and I've actually been using my fiance's phone for most of my client projects, which is more updated. So I absolutely am buying this iPhone because it's going to be a massive upgrade. But that's not to say that if you have the 14, you shouldn't consider upgrading, because there are some significant improvements. If that 120mm telephoto lens is really important for the type of iPhone work you do, I do think it's going to be something that's really valuable, because it's also going to increase your digital zoom from 15 to 25. I never do digital zoom, but it does just increase your reach a lot. And I think it's going to be very valuable, especially if you're ever shooting concerts, if you're shooting out in the, say, outdoors, mountains, or events. I think having that additional zoom will come in handy. And I think it goes without saying that having the ability to record in log 4K 60 ProRes is going to be such a massive draw for people who really focus on color grading and dialing in their colors in their work. Especially that's been something that hasn't really been able to be as possible on iPhone videography before. Yes, you could get third-party apps. Yes, you could just edit ProRes, but it's not going to give you the control that we're now going to be able to see. So I think that'll be really helpful from a client workflow perspective, especially if you regularly mix and incorporate clips from both your cameras and your iPhone, your smartphone. This is just going to make it so much easier to color match. And then, like I said, if you are for sure before the 14, if you're on the 13, honestly, even the 13 was a really great phone, but anything before the 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, whatever it is, this is going to be a massive step up for you. And I think if you're needing a step up, needing an upgrade, you're not going to be unhappy with this phone. But having said that, I think there will be really exciting upgrades probably the next time around. Maybe you won't need an external recording device in order to get that 4K ProRes video and log, because again, to me, that's a big downside to that. But again, is what it is. Bigger rigs, write bigger checks. As funny as and backwards as that is, but it's true. And having a little bit more of a bigger video rig is probably going to make you look a little more professional than just showing up with a little like DJI Osmo and a tiny little phone. If you show up with like, it's got storage, a little SSD on it attached, it's all built out, you're going to look more professional with that, and you're going to have clients not kind of roll their eyes as much. Probably similar to the way that if you rolled up with your actual camera rig. So what models should you get if you are upgrading to the 15? Well, I think a lot of this comes down to price for me, price and usage. Obviously, if you're very media focused, I just don't see a scenario where you choose the base models. The lack of the telephoto lens, it's weird. People don't often use it in their media, and I think it's such a massive mistake, because using the telephoto lens in your videos and in your photos just like elevates the quality so much in my mind. It just makes it look so much more cinematic and professional. But most people seem to like to stick to the regular camera and the ultra wide, which to me just screams, I filmed this on a phone. But again, if you're really into media, don't go with the base model. If you just want to be able to take really good photos and videos, but you're not, needing to do this to a professional level, I think the base models do offer a massive upgrade from the previous model. The price points for the base models are $1129 for the 15, $1279 for the 15 Plus, which again is just a bigger version of it with a little bit longer battery life. And then once you go Pro, it starts at $1449. And again, this is all for 128 gigs, the base model of these different versions. And then if you want the Pro for the 256 to match up to the 256 base model of the Pro Max, you are going to be paying $1599. And that is about $150 less than the Pro Max with the 256 gigs. So the Pro Max is $1749. 17 dollars. 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 17 and you have to obviously make budgetary decisions. For me, the price difference between the base models and the Pro model, definitely worth it to upgrade if you're really into media. And the difference between the Pro and the Pro Max, if you are going to be really utilizing that increased telephoto lens, $150 for the same amount of storage, it doesn't really seem like a reason to not go with the Pro Max. Personally, I chose to go with the Pro Max, and that was one of the deciding factors. It's a $150 difference, and I get a better telephoto camera and longer battery life. So they're all great phones. Hopefully this helps you make your decision. My recommendation, if you are going to upgrade, go with the Pro or Pro Max. From a media standpoint, I just don't see it worth upgrading to the 15 base models. And I feel like it would be remiss to ignore, again, the constant focus that Apple put on sustainability, environmental friendliness. At the end of the day, if you don't need to upgrade, if your phone's working great, save some money. It's better for the environment. It's probably better for your overall financial well-being. And if your phone's doing what you need it to do, then absolutely stick with your phone. There's nothing wrong with sticking with something that works. And honestly, if you get stuck in the cycle of gear chasing, it's never going to end. And I promise, a little bit better of a camera is not going to make you a better creator. So be like Apple and don't upgrade if you don't need to.
See you next year.
Believe me, there's a reason why I still have the 11 base, because it's been working. And I think that's a really important aspect to consider with all of this too. So hopefully you guys found that informative. I made my order this morning. It's coming in next Friday, and I'm going to be releasing a lot of videos just kind of talking about what my reactions are. My friend got the Pro, I got the Pro Max. There's going to be some comparisons. There's going to be testing out the videography, the photography, and releasing that to you guys. So if you guys are interested in that, give me a subscribe, give this video a like so it goes out more, and I will see you next time. Thanks for coming along.